So let's talk about a weird paradox of our time. We've got rovers on other planets, right? But so many of us feel like complete strangers to ourselves. Today, we're going to dig into a really profound text that argues this isn't some accident. Nope, it's actually a direct result of the world that we ourselves have so carefully built. And this quote right here, this is the central idea. The world we've made, with all of its amazing tech and comforts, well, it wasn't really designed with our own human nature in mind. It's almost like we built this huge, magnificent, incredibly complex house, but we never once bothered to ask the person who is actually going to live in it, us, what they needed. All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll dive into this modern paradox of having so much progress, but also so much unhappiness. Then, we'll get into the surprising reasons we've become strangers to ourselves, and that includes the very real dangers of specialization. And finally, we'll look at a really bold solution, a whole new kind of science, and maybe even a new way of thinking to go along with it. Okay, let's start with this huge contradiction of modern life. I mean, we can split the atom, we can send machines to Mars. We have, for all intents and purposes, mastered the physical world. But when it comes to understanding our own minds, our own happiness, our purpose, it kind of feels like we're still stuck at square one. The source we're looking at argues there's this massive imbalance. Our knowledge of non-living stuff, physics, chemistry, engineering, it is just skyrocketed, creating the entire world around us. But our understanding of life itself, of biology, and especially of our own incredibly complex human nature, well, that's just kind of crawled along in comparison. And this isn't an accident. It's a direct result of the scientific priorities we've set for centuries. And this is a pretty powerful consequence. You know that feeling of modern anxiety? That vague dissatisfaction that so many people feel? The text argues it's not just about being stressed or having a busy schedule. It's actually a sign of a deep internal mismatch, a fundamental failure of our own nature to adapt to the very world we so radically and rapidly changed. So if knowing ourselves is so important, why are we so bad at it? You might think, well, we just don't have enough information. But the source argues it's the exact opposite. We are literally drowning in data, but we're starving for actual wisdom. So our ignorance about ourselves really comes from a few key places. First, we're just buried in this mountain of disorganized data, and we can't connect the dots. Then you have every science, sociology, biology, psychology, carving us up into these tiny separate fragments. We also tend to focus only on what's easy to measure, and we shy away from the messy, complicated questions. And, on top of all that, our own biases and beliefs get in the way of seeing ourselves clearly. Now, to understand this obsession with what's measurable, we have to talk about a core idea in science called an operational concept. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It just means that a concept is only considered real or useful if you can define it by the specific, concrete actions you take to measure it. This idea is incredibly powerful, but it's also kind of the root of our problem. Let me give you a perfect example. We all know what 1 meter is, right? It's because there's literally a physical meter stick we can compare things to. The operation of measuring is what gives the concept its meaning. This works beautifully for building bridges or rockets. But what happens when the thing you're trying to measure is a person? Exactly. This is the heart of the issue. Our most trusted scientific methods are, as the source puts it, totally incapable of measuring vanity, hatred, love, beauty. So does that mean those things aren't real? Of course not. It just means our favorite tools can't see them. And this forces us to confront maybe the single biggest obstacle to self-knowledge, specialization. Look, specialization is how we make progress. We absolutely need experts who dedicate their entire lives to understanding one tiny slice of reality. But that intense focus comes with a pretty big cost. When everyone is staring so intently at their own little piece of the puzzle, who is looking at the whole picture? And here's where it gets dangerous. To an economist, you're a rational consumer. To a biologist, you're a collection of genes and hormones. To a sociologist, you're just a member of a demographic group. Each one of these experts is pretty convinced they see the whole you, but really, they're all just looking at one tiny isolated slice of who you are. The source brings up Thomas Edison as a perfect example of this. The guy was an undisputed genius with electricity, but that incredible mastery in one specific area created this false impression for him and for the public that his opinions on everything else, like philosophy or religion, were just as brilliant. So this leads to a really powerful, kind of counterintuitive takeaway. It's not that specialists are bad, we need them. It's that their very success can be a trap. The more respected they are in their own narrow field, the more weight their opinions carry outside of it, and the more damage they can do when they're wrong. Okay, so after painting that pretty bleak picture of the problem, the source doesn't just leave us there. It actually proposes a solution, a really bold, ambitious call for a completely new kind of science, a true science of the human being. This new science would be built on 4 key pillars. First, it would study the whole person, not just the isolated parts. Second, it would combine deep analysis with broad synthesis, actually connecting the dots between different fields. Third, and this is huge, it would treat the unmeasurable stuff, our feelings, our creativity, our purpose, as just as real and just as important as the things we can count. And finally, it would turn our collective scientific curiosity away from just building better machines and back towards understanding ourselves.
But here's the thing. A new science isn't enough on its own. You need a new kind of scientist. All the methods and data in the world are useless without the right kind of mind to put it all together.
Our modern world, and especially our education system, is basically an assembly line for producing analytic minds. The brilliant specialists who can take any problem and break it down into a million little pieces. But the source argues that what we desperately need more of are synthetic minds. The generalists, the big picture thinkers, who can see the hidden connections and put the whole thing back together again. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Real breakthroughs don't come from committees. A grand synthesis of knowledge isn't going to emerge from a conference room full of specialists. It takes a singular vision, one individual mind that's capable of holding all those scattered pieces at once and seeing the pattern that no one else can. And so we get to the ultimate takeaway. In an age where our technology is so powerful it can literally reshape our planet and even ourselves, there is nothing more urgent, nothing more critical than truly understanding who and what we are. This isn't just some philosophical hobby anymore. It's a matter of survival. Which leaves us with this final, really challenging question. If our doctors, our engineers, our economists, our politicians, if they're all just focused on their own specialized little piece of the puzzle, who's taking responsibility for the whole human being?